Picture this. We are in an upscale, dimly lit tavern in London.
Right.
A young American political aide, serving as a foreign policy advisor to a major presidential campaign, is having drinks with a top Australian diplomat.
Just a casual setting, you know?
Exactly. Amidst the clinking glasses and the murmur of the crowd, the American leans in and drops a massive secret.
Yeah.
He tells the diplomat that a foreign government possesses highly damaging, politically explosive information relating to the opposing candidate.
Which is just, I mean, you don't just say that over drunks.
You really don't. But that casual, boastful conversation over drinks in a foreign capital, it quietly makes its way from Australian intelligence to American authorities.
And that's the spark.
That is the exact spark that triggered the most complex, polarized, and consequential legal investigation of the 21st century.
Well, the machinery of the federal government often moves at this glacial pace.
Right, usually.
But when intelligence like that crosses the desk of the FBI, especially combined with the fact that political party email servers were actively being breached at that very moment.
Oh, right, the timing.
Exactly. The gears lock into place immediately. That tip from the London bar led directly to the opening of a massive counterintelligence investigation.
The one codenamed Crossfire Hurricane.
Yeah, Crossfire Hurricane. It was essentially the quiet, classified prologue to what became a massive public earthquake.
So today, we are undertaking a comprehensive exploration of that exact earthquake.
Yeah, the special counsel investigation led by Robert S. Mueller III.
And for you, the listener, navigating the history of this investigation, I mean, it often feels like walking through a minefield, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's all spin, cable news shouting matches, selective editing.
It's exhausting. So our mission here is to cut entirely through that noise. We're looking at a huge stack of source materials today. We've got recent obituaries marking his passing, detailed biographical encyclopedia entries, academic legal summaries, and most crucially, extensive excerpts from the primary source itself, which is the 448-page official government report.
The actual text.
Yes, we are going to extract the factual bedrock. We need to understand what the investigation actually uncovered, how the foreign interference operated, and who the special counsel was as a person.
Right, and why the architecture of this whole thing matters profoundly to you as a citizen, especially navigating today's complex information landscape.
Definitely. And the goal is to look at the structural engineering of the event.
We are not here to debate the politics. We are here to examine the factual findings, the legal thresholds applied, and the constitutional paradoxes that the investigation just kept colliding with.
Because the original report is, well, it's a dense, highly technical legal document.
Yeah, written by prosecutors for other prosecutors.
Which makes it incredibly easy to be misinterpreted, right? Or weaponized by political actors on all sides.
Oh, perfectly weaponized.
Which brings me to a crystal clear, non-negotiable impartiality disclaimer before we go any further.
Very important.
The sources we're working from today, they contain highly politically charged reactions from prominent figures on both the left wing and the right wing of American politics.
Yeah, a lot of anger in these documents.
So much anger. But we take absolutely no sides in this discussion. We're not endorsing any political viewpoint, nor are we validating the outrage of either side.
Right.
Our singular job is to strictly, meticulously, and impartially report the information contained in the original source material. We are just holding a mirror up to the documents, nothing more.
And an objective reading of those documents requires us to first understand the lens through which they were written, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the author.
Because the author of this report was not a politician. He wasn't a pundit, and he certainly wasn't some kind of revolutionary.
No, not at all.
He was fundamentally an institutionalist. So to comprehend why this report frustrated almost every political faction in America, we really have to understand the specific, almost vanishing breed of Washington architecture that he represented.
Let's build that profile. Because when his appointment as special counsel was announced, there was this brief, almost surreal moment of bipartisan applause.
Yeah, both sides of the aisle praised the choice.
Which is unheard of.
Yeah.
So looking at his background, he was born in New York City into a world of immense privilege, went to Princeton University, then earned a master's degree from New York University.
But the defining crucible of his character was his military service.
Right.
During the height of the Vietnam War, he didn't seek a deferment. He joined the Marine Corps.
And that Marine Corps experience, from what the sources say, is foundational to understanding his rigid adherence to structure.
Oh, absolutely. He served as an officer commanding a rifle platoon in combat. And, the responsibilities of a platoon commander in a hostile environment. They fundamentally wire a person to respect the chain of command.
Because ambiguity gets people killed.
Exactly. You operate strictly by the established rules of engagement. You prioritize the institution and the mission over personal ambition or public relations.
And he was highly decorated.
Yeah. He was. He received a Bronze Star with a V device for heroism, a Purple Heart for wounds received in combat, and 2 Navy Commendation Medals.
That military framework is just so crucial. He relied on binary, clear directives.
Yeah, black and white.
So he survives the war, returns stateside, earns his law degree, and begins this long career as a federal prosecutor.
And here is the element of his resume that gave him such a bulletproof reputation. He was a registered Republican, right?
Right.
Yet he was repeatedly appointed to high-level, Senate-confirmed positions by 4 different presidents across alternating parties.
That is insane.
I know. He was placed in positions of immense legal authority by administrations from completely different ends of the spectrum.
A track record like that is almost statistically impossible in modern Washington, unless your defining characteristic is just complete unyielding discretion.
Yeah, he operated completely outside the spoil system of partisan politics. And the pinnacle of this bipartisan trust occurred when he was appointed to be the director of the FBI.
And the timing of that appointment is just staggering to me. He officially took over the FBI just 1 week before the most devastating terrorist attacks in American history.
Yeah, the September 11 attacks.
I just cannot fathom the psychological and administrative burden of inheriting the nation's premier law enforcement agency 7 days before that happens.
Well, the bureau he inherited on his first week was fundamentally different from the bureau he commanded the week after.
How so?
Prior to the attacks, the FBI was primarily a reactive law enforcement agency. Their mandate was to investigate crimes after they occurred.
Like solving bank robberies, taking down organized crime, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Kidnappings, bank fraud. But after the towers fell, he was tasked with executing a massive structural paradigm shift.
He had to change the entire nature of the organization.
Right. He had to transform this reactive police force into a proactive, forward-looking counterterrorism and global intelligence powerhouse, and he spent 12 years executing that transformation.
And throughout that grueling 12-year tenure, he cultivated a very specific persona, both publicly and privately.
Very notoriously tight-lipped.
Yeah, he had this patrician, no-nonsense, incredibly formal manner. The sources note that in the hallways of the FBI, he earned the nickname Bobby Three Sticks.
Right, a nod to the Roman numeral 3 at the end of his name.
Exactly. He was famous for wearing a crisp white shirt every single day, never deviating from his uniform, never participating in Washington gossip, and operating completely by the book.
The white shirt wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a manifestation of his internal order. He viewed the law not as a flexible tool for achieving justice, but as this rigid set of boundaries that must be respected regardless of the outcome.
I kind of view his role in Washington almost like a human metronome.
Oh, I like that.
He is steady, he is formal, he is ticking away at the exact same rhythm, regardless of whether the political weather around him is a sunny day or a Category 5 hurricane.
Right.
But that presents a massive contradiction for me. How does someone with a universally respected, fiercely bipartisan, straight-laced reputation end up at the dead center of the most toxic, bitter, and chaotic political firestorm of the century?
Well, the contradiction is actually the explanation.
What do you mean?
His rigid adherence to the rule of law made him the only acceptable candidate for an impossible, highly politicized job. The political system needed a figure of unimpeachable integrity to lend credibility to this explosive investigation.
Right, they needed a Boy Scout.
Exactly. But what the politicians failed to realize was that an institutionalist like him would never view his job through a political lens. His entire background set the stage for how he would execute his mandate.
So he would stick stubbornly to the absolute letter of the law.
Yes. Applying strict federal criminal statutes to unprecedented political behavior. And the uncomfortable reality of the American system is that strict criminal law is rarely equipped to provide those satisfying, cathartic answers that a polarized public demands.
Okay, so to understand how those legal gears began turning, we really have to look at the specific crisis that forced him out of retirement.
The spark.
Right. We established that the FBI was quietly running the Crossfire hurricane probe during the election year. The election happens, the new president takes the oath of office, and the investigation continues under the leadership of the current FBI director.
Right.
But the pressure cooker finally detonates In the spring of that first year,
Mm.
the president makes the sudden, shocking decision to fire the FBI director.
Which is just, it's a constitutional shockwave. The termination of the FBI director while he is actively leading a counterintelligence investigation into the president's own campaign.
It's unprecedented.
Completely.
Yeah.
It immediately raises questions about the integrity of the justice system and the possibility of a cover-up at the highest levels of the executive branch.
Now, in a normal procedural environment,
Mm.
the Attorney General of the United States oversees the FBI, right?
Yeah, normally.
So the logical step would be for the Attorney General to simply appoint a new acting director, reassure the public, and manage the investigation internally. Why couldn't that happen here?
Because the procedural environment was already compromised. The Attorney General had previously been forced to formally recuse himself from any Justice Department investigations regarding foreign interference in the election.
An illegal recusal means he strips himself of all authority, right?
Exactly. All authority, oversight, and operational knowledge of that specific matter. He had to take this extraordinary step because the press had uncovered his own undisclosed contacts with the foreign ambassador during the campaign.
Contacts he had failed to disclose during his Senate confirmation hearings.
Right, so the top law enforcement officer in the country is entirely sidelined for this specific case.
By the rules of succession, all oversight authority for the probe falls to the second in command, the Deputy Attorney General.
And he is suddenly holding a ticking time bomb.
Seriously, the FBI is temporarily being run by an acting director, but the sources indicate the Deputy Attorney General strongly felt this acting director was not the right fit to lead an investigation of this profound sensitivity.
Especially in the wake of the highly controversial firing. Furthermore, his bench was incredibly thin.
What do you mean?
Well, because this crisis occurred in the very early months of a new presidential administration, there was a severe shortage of Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys across the Justice Department.
Oh, the political appointees just weren't in place yet.
Right. They simply weren't there to handle a crisis of this scale. So he is boxed in. The FBI director is fired. The attorney general is recused. The acting director is deemed unsuitable.
And the public is demanding answers about whether the president fired the top investigator to protect himself.
Exactly. He needs a figure so unassailable, so universally respected, that neither the president nor the press can immediately dismiss the findings.
He needs the metronome.
Yes. So he reaches outside the government and appoints the retired institutionalist as special counsel.
Let's dissect the mechanics of this, because I think a lot of people misunderstand it. What exactly is the legal architecture of a special counsel? It operates a bit like a corporation calling in an outside independent auditing firm when the internal accounting department is suspected of massive fraud.
Right. The independent auditor analogy captures the intent, yeah, but the legal reality is vastly more complicated.
How so?
The special counsel mechanism exists to solve a specific constitutional problem, which is conflict of interest. When the Department of Justice is tasked with investigating the president or his inner circle, the inherent conflict is that the president is the ultimate boss of the Justice Department.
Right.
A special counsel is designed to inject distance between the executive branch and the investigation. Under the federal regulations, they operate independently. They are not subjected to the day-to-day supervision of political appointees.
So they have sweeping powers.
Huge powers. They can issue subpoenas, impanel grand juries, hire their own staff of specialized prosecutors, and make independent determinations about whether federal criminal charges should be brought.
I understand the theory, but looking at the structure of the Constitution, I really have to challenge the premise of true independence here.
Go on.
Article 2 of the Constitution vests all executive power in the president. The Department of Justice is an executive agency. Therefore, the special counsel, no matter how insulated by regulations, is still an employee of the executive branch.
Yes.
Can a subordinate employee truly, structurally investigate and prosecute their own ultimate boss? Isn't this regulation just a bureaucratic wall built inside a house that the president still owns?
That tension you are describing is the exact paradox that defines this entire era. You are referencing the unitary executive theory, which argues that the president has absolute control over the executive branch.
Exact.
The regulations attempt to carve out a protected sphere of independence, but, as you correctly noted, the special counsel still ultimately reports to the attorney general, or in this case, the acting attorney general.
So they can be fired.
They can, though the regulations stipulate it must be for good cause. So the independence is not absolute. It relies heavily on institutional norms and the political cost of interfering with the probe.
And Mueller understood this precarious architecture intimately.
Intimately. And that deeply influenced how conservatively he operated.
Okay, so armed with his precarious independence, he assembles a team of top-tier prosecutors and begins his work. His mandate is broken down into specific operational directives.
Right, let's look at the first one.
The first massive question they had to answer: what actually happened to the digital infrastructure of the American election?
The findings in Volume 1 of the report are unequivocal. The investigation definitively established that a foreign government interfered in the presidential election.
And the report uses a very specific phrase to describe the scope of this operation. It says it occurred in a sweeping and systematic fashion.
Sweeping and systematic. And furthermore, this interference was not just aggressive statecraft, it constituted a direct violation of United States criminal law.
That phrase, sweeping and systematic, it really stands out precisely because his team was notoriously allergic to hyperbole.
Oh, absolutely. When an institutionalist uses language that strong, it signifies an overwhelming volume of evidence.
So the sources outline that the foreign government utilized two primary, distinct methods to execute this attack. The first method involved a sprawling, highly coordinated social media disinformation campaign.
Yeah, a psychological operation. It was primarily executed by an organization based overseas, often referred to in the media as a troll farm.
But that term kind of trivializes it, doesn't it?
It really does. It trivializes the sophistication of the operation. This was a well-funded, compartmentalized intelligence apparatus employing hundreds of individuals working in shifts to manipulate the American public sphere.
I want you, the listener, to really internalize the mechanics of this. Think about your own digital footprint back then. Think about the groups you joined, the accounts you followed, the viral memes that populated your feeds.
Yeah, it was everywhere.
The report meticulously documented how a hostile foreign intelligence operation mapped the fractures in American society and weaponized the very platforms you use daily. They didn't just hack computers, they hacked the American perception of reality.
That's a great way to put it.
So how exactly did they operationalize this discord?
Well, the mechanism relied on exploiting the algorithms of social media platforms, which naturally prioritize engagement, outrage, and emotional resonance.
Right, anger gets clicks.
Exactly. So they created thousands of fictitious online personas, deeply backstopped to look like genuine American citizens.
And they operated across the political spectrum, right?
Oh, entirely. Some accounts posed as aggressive right-wing activists, while others posed as militant left-wing organizers. The objective, as stated in the report, was to provoke and amplify political and social discord.
They sought to widen existing cultural fault lines regarding race, immigration, religion.
Everything. And while the general goal was chaos, the report makes it clear they had specific electoral preferences. They actively sought to disparage one major candidate and systematically favor the other.
But they also deployed resources to bolster the campaigns of third-party or fringe candidates, right?
Yes. The strategy there is obvious. If you prop up candidates on the political fringes, you siphon moderate or disgruntled voters away from the mainstream candidate you were trying to defeat.
And the sophistication went way beyond just posting memes. The report details how they purchased political advertisements using foreign currency routed through shell companies.
They engaged in identity theft to set up American bank accounts.
Wow.
And in perhaps the most chilling escalation, these fake personas successfully organized physical, real-world political rallies on American soil.
Wait, really? Actual physical rallies?
Yes. They contacted genuine American citizens, manipulated them into believing they were working with local grassroots organizers, and provided logistical support and funding to get Americans marching in the streets.
So the puppeteers were sitting at desks thousands of miles away, manipulating the physical movements of American citizens.
It is a profound violation of national sovereignty, executed entirely through the internet.
But the disinformation campaign was only one half of the strategy.
Right, method 2.
The second method was a brute force cyber warfare operation. This wasn't carried out by a troll farm. This was executed by elite military intelligence.
A targeted multi-stage hacking and extraction mission. Starting early in the election year, specialized cyber units began attacking the digital infrastructure of one of the campaigns.
And they didn't use incredibly complex zero-day exploits initially, did they?
No, they relied on human error. They launched sophisticated spear phishing campaigns.
The mechanics of spear phishing are just devastatingly simple but highly effective. They sent emails to campaign officials that perfectly mimicked legitimate security alerts from a major search engine.
Right. The email tells the target their password has been compromised and provides a link to reset it.
And when the campaign chairman or his staff clicked that link, and entered their credentials, they were literally handing the keys to their entire digital life directly to foreign military intelligence.
Exactly. And once inside the accounts, they exfiltrated hundreds of thousands of private emails and documents.
Then they escalated their targets.
They successfully hacked into the internal computer networks of the National Party Committee itself. They planted malware, established persistent access, and spent weeks silently vacuuming up internal communications, opposition research, and strategic data.
Now, stealing the data is espionage, which happens every day.
Sure.
But what elevated this to an attack on the election was what they did next. They didn't keep the intelligence secret.
No, they weaponized it for maximum public impact.
Right. They created fictitious online hacktivist personas to serve as the public faces of the breach.
And through these fake fronts, and later by funneling the stolen materials through a prominent leak organization, they strategically timed the release of these private emails to inflict maximum political damage at critical moments during the election cycle.
Surgical timing.
Yes, designed to dominate news cycles. The report provides a granular, forensic accounting of this operation. It identifies the specific military units involved, traces the cryptocurrency used to lease the servers.
It maps the exact digital pathways the stolen data traveled.
It's incredibly thorough.
However, there's a crucial distinction we must make regarding the scope of these findings. The report exhaustively proved the effort of the foreign government.
Yes, the effort.
It documented the cyber attacks and the disinformation campaigns with surgical precision. What the investigation did not do, because it was outside the scope of its forensic capabilities, was measure the impact.
Right. The report does not offer a conclusion on whether the memes or the email dumps actually changed enough votes in key swing states to alter the final outcome of the election.
Because measuring the impact of psychological operations on human voting behavior is a sociological puzzle, not a legal one. Right.
Exactly. A prosecutor cannot subpoena a voter's subconscious to determine why they pulled a specific lever in the voting booth.
That makes perfect sense.
But regardless of the unquantifiable impact on the vote tallies, Volume 1 revealed a modern cyber warfare blueprint that forever shattered the illusion of American digital invulnerability.
It demonstrated that foreign adversaries could reach directly into the pockets of the American electorate and manipulate the democratic process without firing a single physical shot.
Absolutely terrifying.
Which brings us to the second, far more explosive question of the investigation.
The one everyone was waiting for.
Right. If we accept the definitive finding that foreign military intelligence and state-sponsored troll farms were actively executing a massive criminal operation to help one campaign win, the immediate existential question for the country was, did that campaign know about it, and did they actively assist?
This leads us into the labyrinth of conspiracy versus collusion.
Yes. This is the juncture where the legal terminology completely decoupled from the public discourse.
For over 2 years, the singular question dominating the media landscape was about collusion.
Right, everyone was screaming about collusion.
But the report begins the section by explicitly stating that it did not evaluate the evidence under the framework of collusion.
To a layperson, that sounds like a dodge. Why wouldn't the special counsel look for the very thing the entire country was arguing about?
Because he was bound by the United States Code, and collusion is not a defined crime in the federal criminal statutes.
It's just a word we use.
Right, it's a colloquial term we use in journalism and everyday conversation to describe a shady partnership. But a federal judge cannot sentence someone for collusion.
So what do they look for instead?
They had to apply the strict legal framework of criminal conspiracy, specifically conspiracy to defraud the United States or conspiracy to violate federal election laws.
Okay, we need to explain the mechanics of criminal conspiracy, because it is the hinge upon which the entire first half of the report swings. What specifically does the government have to prove to convict someone of conspiracy?
Criminal conspiracy requires prosecutors to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that 2 or more people entered into a mutual agreement, either explicit or tacit, to commit a specific federal crime.
So a meeting of the minds.
Yes. Furthermore, at least one member of that conspiracy must commit an overt act to further the goals of the agreement. It is not enough for 2 parties to simply take parallel actions that happen to benefit each other.
The law demands proof of an active, understood partnership to execute a criminal plot.
Exactly.
So let's use a mundane analogy to separate a coincidence of interest from a criminal conspiracy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine 2 different neighbors both hate the ugly fence separating their properties.
Right.
One night, neighbor A goes out with a sledgehammer, and starts smashing the fence. Neighbor B looks at his window, sees the fence being destroyed, feels thrilled about it, and maybe even leaves his porch light on to help neighbor A see better.
That's a great example.
Under the law, neighbor B is a terrible neighbor, but he is not guilty of conspiracy to destroy property. He just benefited from someone else's crime. A conspiracy only exists if neighbor A and neighbor B met in the driveway beforehand, shook hands, and agreed, "We are going to destroy this fence together."
The fence analogy perfectly isolates the element of agreement. The investigation scoured the actions of the campaign, looking for that handshake in the driveway.
And what did they find?
What they found, according to the report, were numerous links between individuals with ties to the foreign government and individuals associated with the campaign.
Let's examine the anatomy of those links, because they were deeply alarming to counterintelligence agents.
Oh, highly alarming.
The most heavily scrutinized event was a meeting at a prominent tower in New York City. The setup for this meeting is astounding. An intermediary emails the candidate's son and explicitly offers to provide the campaign with highly damaging derogatory information regarding the opponent.
And the email explicitly states that this information is part of the foreign government's support for the candidate.
The intermediary did not hide the source of the intelligence. They announced it as a state-sponsored offering.
And the response from the candidate's son was not to contact the FBI to report a foreign intelligence overture.
No, his emailed response was, "If it's what you say, I love it."
I love it. That phrase is practically the title of this entire chapter of history.
Following that email exchange, top campaign officials took the meeting specifically to receive the promised dirt.
And that meeting was just one of several links. The investigation also detailed extensive back-channel communications between the incoming national security advisor and the foreign ambassador.
Secretly discussing the lifting of U.S. sanctions, right?
Yes. Furthermore, the report revealed that the candidate's business organization was actively negotiating a highly lucrative real estate project in the foreign capital well into the summer of the election year.
This was happening simultaneously while the candidate was repeatedly publicly denying having any ongoing financial interests there.
Right. So the report synthesizes these events by stating that the campaign was not a victim in the dark.
The investigation concluded that the campaign fully expected it would benefit electorally from the stolen emails being dumped.
Yes.
So I have to stop and aggressively push back on the legal conclusion here.
Go ahead.
If top advisors take a meeting explicitly to receive dirt from a foreign government, if the incoming national security advisor is secretly negotiating sanctions relief, if a campaign chairman is sharing internal polling data with a foreign intelligence asset, and if the entire campaign expects to benefit from the cyber attack, how on earth does a prosecutor look at that mountain of highly suspicious, intertwined behavior and conclude there is no conspiracy charge? Where does the legal machinery break down?
Well, the machinery breaks down at the burden of proof. The standard in an American criminal court is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay.
The prosecutors analyzed that tower meeting, for example. They had the emails, they had the attendance records. But to charge a conspiracy to violate election law, they had to prove the participants understood they were engaging in illegal activity and that the dirt offered constituted a thing of value under campaign finance statutes.
And they couldn't do that.
The prosecutors concluded they could not reliably prove the required criminal intent of the participants beyond a reasonable doubt.
So incompetence or ignorance of the law essentially served as a shield against a conspiracy charge.
In some specific instances regarding campaign finance law, yes, the legal threshold requires a willful violation of known statutes.
Wow.
But the broader reason no conspiracy was charged regarding the hacking and the disinformation operations is that the investigators simply could not find documentary or testimonial proof of an explicit agreement to participate in those specific crimes.
There was no email saying, "We agree to help you hack."
Exactly. Sharing a mutual goal of defeating a candidate is not a crime. Welcoming the political benefit of a foreign adversary's crime is unseemly, perhaps deeply unethical, but under the strict text of federal law, it is not a conspiracy.
However, Volume 1 contains a massive, glaring caveat that completely recontextualizes that finding.
The incomplete picture.
Yes. The report explicitly states that the investigators' picture of what actually happened during the campaign was incomplete. They didn't have all the puzzle pieces. Why was the evidentiary record compromised?
Because the investigation was actively hindered by the targets, the report notes that several key witnesses flatly lied to federal investigators.
which resulted in perjury and false statement charges later.
Right. Other crucial witnesses invoked their Fifth Amendment constitutional right against self-incrimination, refusing to answer questions entirely.
Now, the Fifth Amendment is a sacred constitutional right, so investigators can't hold that against a witness or assume guilt.
True. But the destruction of evidence is a different matter entirely.
What happened there?
The report details how numerous individuals associated with the campaign utilized encrypted messaging applications that feature auto-delete functions, ensuring their communications were destroyed before the FBI could ever subpoena them.
Wow.
Other witnesses actively deleted emails and texts after the investigation had begun. The report explicitly warns that these missing communications and false testimonies prevented investigators from fully corroborating certain events or determining the full extent of the coordination.
Returning to our neighbor analogy, it's as if the prosecutor suspects neighbor A and neighbor B planned the fence destruction via text message.
Right.
But when the FBI seizes neighbor B's phone, the device has been wiped clean. The prosecutor knows they hated the fence, knows they were awake that night, and knows they both benefited.
But without the text messages to prove the handshake agreement, the strict machinery of the law prevents an indictment.
The absence of evidence, especially when intentionally destroyed, forced the prosecutor's hand.
And that is why the definitive final conclusion of Volume 1 was phrased with precise legal conservatism. The investigation did not establish that members of the campaign conspired or coordinated with the foreign government.
They did not say it didn't happen?
Exactly. They said they could not legally establish that it happened based on the available surviving evidence.
This nuanced, somewhat frustrating conclusion to the conspiracy question launches us directly into the paradox of Volume 2.
The obstruction of justice dilemma.
Right. Because if there was no underlying criminal conspiracy established, why did the president act like a man desperate to cover up a massive crime? Why utilize the immense powers of the executive branch to attack the investigators?
Well, the legal theory of obstruction does not require an underlying crime to be proven.
It doesn't.
No. The act of interfering with a federal investigation, tampering with witnesses, or destroying evidence is a severe crime in itself because it attacks the integrity of the justice system.
So what do prosecutors have to prove?
3 elements. An obstructive act occurred, there was a nexus to an official proceeding, and the act was executed with a corrupt intent.
Volume 2 is essentially a 200-page forensic psychological profile of the president, detailing 10 specific episodes where he may have met those legal criteria.
The narrative reads like a political thriller.
Let's dissect a few of the most egregious episodes. The timeline of obstruction begins almost immediately with the National Security Advisor.
Right. When the White House learned that he had lied to the FBI regarding his secret transition conversations, the president summoned the FBI director to the Oval Office.
And according to the contemporaneous memos, the president cleared the room of all other officials, looked at the director, and said, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go."
Asking the FBI to drop a federal investigation into a top advisor is a massive breach of post-Watergate norms.
And when the director refuses to let it go, the president escalates. He fires him.
Now, the president initially tries to build a paper trail, claiming he was fired because of how he mishandled a previous investigation.
But the president's own lack of discipline destroys that cover story almost immediately, right?
Within days, he gives a televised interview and openly admits that the Russia investigation was on his mind when he made the decision.
And he later told foreign diplomats in the Oval Office that firing the director relieved great pressure on him.
By his own admission, the termination was an attempt to alter the trajectory of the investigation.
And it didn't stop there. Once the special counsel is appointed, the panic inside the White House intensifies. The report details a stunning episode where the president calls his White House counsel at home on a weekend.
He directs the counsel to call the deputy attorney general and demand that the special counsel be fired, citing manufactured conflicts of interest.
The mechanism of this is critical. The president is ordering his top lawyer to execute the removal of the lead investigator.
And the counsel, recognizing the historical parallel to Richard Nixon, refuses.
He actually packs up his office, preparing to resign rather than trigger a constitutional crisis.
The order is ignored, the special counsel stays, but the cover-up of the attempt becomes its own separate episode of obstruction.
Right. Months later, When the press finally reports the attempt to fire the special counsel, the president orders the White House counsel to create a fake historical record.
He demands he draft a letter falsely denying that the order was ever given.
And the counsel refuses again, explicitly stating the press reports were accurate and he would not lie for the record.
We also see the president utilizing intermediaries outside the official government chain of command to try and choke the investigation.
Like dictating a message to his former campaign manager, a private citizen, instructing him to deliver it to the recused attorney general.
Demanding the investigation be strictly limited to future election meddling, thereby completely shutting down the probe into his own campaign.
Which is wild. And we also see obstruction manifesting as witness tampering.
Yes. The report documents how he used his massive public platform to wage a psychological campaign against potential witnesses.
He publicly praised their strength for staying silent and repeatedly dangled the immense unchecked constitutional power of the presidential pardon in front of them.
The message was clear. Stay quiet, don't help the investigators, and you will be saved from prison.
So you have a meticulously documented pattern of behavior. Firing the lead investigator, attempting to fire the special counsel, demanding the creation of fraudulent records, attempting to unilaterally limit the scope of the probe, and signaling pardons to silence witnesses.
But the paradox embedded in the report is that many of the most catastrophic acts of obstruction were never actually completed.
Right. The president gave the orders, but the bureaucratic machinery simply refused to turn.
The report notes he was repeatedly saved from committing overt statutory crimes because his subordinates simply engaged in passive resistance and refused to carry out his directives.
But failure to execute the order does not legally absolve the president. Attempted obstruction is still a crime.
Exactly. The central legal defense raised by the president's legal team relied on a maximalist interpretation of Article 2 of the Constitution.
They argued that because the president is the head of the executive branch, he possesses absolute authority to fire any executive branch employee and to end any DOJ investigation for any reason.
Therefore, exercising a constitutional power cannot, by definition, be criminal obstruction of justice.
I understand the constitutional argument. If you own the factory, you can fire the floor manager.
Right.
But I have to push back on the application of that theory here. The obstruction statute hinges on that third element you mentioned earlier, corrupt intent.
Yes, corrupt intent.
If a CEO fires an auditor because the auditor is incompetent, that is a legal exercise of power. But if the CEO fires the auditor specifically because the auditor is about to uncover the CEO's massive embezzlement scheme, the firing is legal procedurally, but the intent transforms the act into criminal obstruction.
That's exactly it.
Doesn't the corrupt intent override the inherent constitutional power?
You have just articulated the exact legal philosophy adopted by the special counsel. They deeply analyzed this Article 2 defense and soundly rejected it. They concluded that while the president has broad constitutional authority to manage the executive branch, that authority does not grant him a shield to engage in corrupt acts designed to subvert the administration of justice.
So they rejected the defense. Mueller determines the president likely committed obstructive acts. The logical, expected outcome of a prosecutor reaching those conclusions is an indictment.
But that doesn't happen.
He documents 10 episodes of devastating obstruction, builds the entire legal framework, and then suddenly stops short. He refuses to state whether the president actually committed a crime. Why does he paralyze his own investigation at the finish line?
The paralysis was not a failure of nerve. It was adherence to a decades-old internal Department of Justice policy.
This is the Office of Legal Counsel Policy, the OLC.
Yes. In the 1970s, and again reaffirmed later, the OLC issued a binding legal memorandum. This memo concluded that the indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would unconstitutionally undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its functions.
The reasoning being that if a local prosecutor or a special counsel could drag the commander-in-chief into a courtroom, force him to sit at a defense table for months, and potentially imprison him, the entire executive branch would collapse.
The separation of powers would be destroyed. The OLC memo establishes that the criminal justice system is not the constitutionally appropriate venue to handle the misconduct of a sitting president.
And Robert Mueller accepted this policy as binding law.
He entered the investigation knowing that no matter what evidence he uncovered, he lacked the legal authority to ask a grand jury for an indictment while the president remained in office.
So the investigation is legally neutered from day one. But he took this restriction a step further, inventing a doctrine of fairness that infuriated critics. Explain the ethical dilemma he faced regarding simply accusing the president, even without an indictment.
Well, his reasoning was deeply rooted in the protections afforded by the American legal system. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the accused the right to a speedy and public trial, the right to face their accusers, and the right to clear their name before a jury. He reasoned that if he cannot legally indict the president, it would be fundamentally unfair to formally accuse him of a crime in a public report.
Because if he publishes a report saying the president is guilty, the president is branded a criminal by the Justice Department.
Yeah.
But he has no legal venue to fight back.
Exactly. He can't go to court to prove his innocence because there is no trial. He is essentially convicted in the court of public opinion without due process.
So Mueller felt that issuing a conclusive judgment of criminal guilt, knowing a trial was constitutionally impossible, violated the core principles of prosecutorial fairness.
Therefore, he determined that his office would not make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. They would not say he was guilty, but crucially, because of the overwhelming evidence of obstruction, they also could not say he was innocent.
This philosophical knot produced the single most famous, frustrating, and heavily debated sentence of the entire report.
The defining phrase.
While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him.
Does not exonerate him. That double negative is the sound of an institutionalist prosecutor slamming into a constitutional wall.
He specifically elaborated that if his team had confidence the president clearly did not commit obstruction, they would have explicitly stated so.
The fact that they refused to clear him was the loudest alarm bell he felt legally permitted to ring.
But wait, I have to step back and ask the question that drove millions of Americans absolutely crazy.
Let's hear it.
If you are the special counsel, and you know on day one that you are legally forbidden from indicting the president, and you know that fairness dictates you can't even formally accuse him of a crime, why on earth do you spend 22 months, issue thousands of subpoenas, interview hundreds of witnesses, and spend millions of dollars investigating the president for obstruction?
That's a great question.
What is the functional point of investigating a crime if you are structurally banned from enforcing the law?
He anticipated this criticism. He synthesized his rationale into a specific constitutional logic. First, the evidentiary record is fragile.
Memories fade, documents are destroyed.
Exactly.
So he builds the ultimate case file, leaves it on the desk of Congress, and steps back. Which brings us to the final segment of our exploration, the fallout, the cost, and the tragic final chapter of his public life.
The investigative phase officially concludes when he submits the confidential report to the Department of Justice in the spring of 2019.
But the political war over the interpretation was just beginning.
The handling of the report's release is a masterclass in narrative control. When he submitted his work, it was handed to the newly confirmed Attorney General.
And because it contained classified intelligence, it couldn't be released to the public immediately, right?
It required weeks of careful redaction. However, the Attorney General did not wait weeks to shape the narrative. Within 48 hours, he released his own 4-page summary letter to Congress and the public.
And this 4-page letter becomes the definitive filter through which the entire country first experiences the report.
Exactly. And the summary letter was highly decisive, stripping away all of the agonizing nuance. Regarding the contacts, he explicitly declared the investigation did not establish conspiracy.
But his handling of the obstruction volume was even more consequential.
He stated that since the special counsel declined to reach a legal conclusion on obstruction, the responsibility fell to the Attorney General. He announced that he and the deputy had reviewed the evidence and concluded it was legally insufficient to establish an obstruction offense.
He essentially acts as the judge and jury over a weekend, declaring the president entirely cleared of obstruction before a single member of Congress or the public has read a word of the evidence.
The critics absolutely exploded.
Legal scholars, politicians, and eventually even members of the investigative team expressed deep frustration. They argued the 4-page summary fundamentally misrepresented the severity and volume of the evidence.
It provided the exact political weapon the White House needed, a headline declaring total exoneration.
The contrast between the definitive summary and the dense, cautious report fueled immense partisan outrage. But amidst all the screaming regarding the president's personal conduct, we really must look at the actual undeniable toll of the investigation.
While the president avoided charges, the special counsel's office operated as a devastatingly effective prosecutorial unit against his orbit.
Let's run the final numbers. The investigation resulted in the indictment of 34 individuals and 3 corporate entities.
It wasn't a witch hunt that found nothing. It systematically dismantled the leadership of the campaign.
The chairman of the campaign was convicted of massive tax fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy, resulting in a prison sentence.
The former national security advisor pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI.
The president's personal lawyer pleaded guilty to campaign finance violations orchestrated at the direction of the president.
And a longtime political advisor was convicted of lying to Congress and witness tampering.
It is a breathtaking list of criminality, though it is critical to note how the president utilized his powers at the very end of his term. He ultimately utilized his pardon power to commute sentences and grant full pardons, completely negating the legal consequences of the most prominent convictions.
Beyond the domestic figures, they also secured sweeping indictments against foreign actors. 13 individuals associated with the troll farm, and 12 military intelligence officers.
And while those individuals will likely never see an American courtroom, the indictments serve as a permanent, detailed public record of hostile state actions.
Right. And what about the financial cost of all this?
Yeah, a recurring political talking point was that this was a massive, unjustified drain on American taxpayer money.
The financial reality is one of the most surprising facts of the entire saga. The investigation was expensive. Over its lifespan, it cost the federal government approximately $32 million.
Right.
But the investigation actually operated at a massive financial profit for the Treasury.
How does an investigation turn a profit?
Through the aggressive financial prosecution of the campaign chairman. When they uncovered his decades of tax evasion and money laundering, they seized his assets. Real estate, bank accounts, financial holdings.
The total value netted the government approximately $48 million.
The investigation fully paid for itself, covered all expenses, and deposited millions of dollars in surplus back into the federal treasury.
So the investigation concludes, the report is public, convictions are secured, and the treasury is enriched. But the political system still demands a climax.
In the summer of 2019, Congress finally uses its subpoena power to compel the special counsel to testify publicly.
The nation tunes in expecting fireworks, a dramatic Hollywood confrontation. But what they got was something entirely different.
It was deeply anticlimactic. He was an incredibly reluctant witness. He viewed the congressional hearing as a political circus designed to generate sound bites.
He was famously terse. He repeatedly, stubbornly refused to answer questions that strayed even an inch beyond the 4 corners of his written report.
His repeated refrain was, "The report is my testimony." He essentially sat there for hours telling Congress to go back and read the pages he had already given them.
He did use the platform to firmly reject claims of total exoneration, clarifying under oath that a president could be charged after leaving office. But he provided almost no new emotional fuel for the media.
Following that testimony, he essentially vanished from public life.
We only learned the context of his final years much later. In 2025, his family released a statement revealing he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease back in 2021.
A devastating physical diagnosis, a slow decline that casts a poignant light on his occasionally halting demeanor during that final testimony. He was fighting a private battle while enduring the most intense public scrutiny imaginable.
He passed away at the age of 81. And the public reactions to his death, they serve as a perfect encapsulation of the deeply fractured nation he left behind.
The obituaries read like they were describing 2 completely different human beings. On one side, Democrats and traditional institutionalists mourn the loss of a dedicated public servant, a Bronze Star war hero who served his country his entire life.
And on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, the former president posted a reaction that abandoned all traditional political decorum. He essentially said he was glad he was dead and could no longer hurt people.
That juxtaposition is the ultimate tragedy of his final public act. Here was a man who spent his entire life playing strictly by the rules, honoring the institutions. He was handed an impossible task, executed it by delivering a highly nuanced legal document.
But he delivered it to a society that had completely lost its capacity for nuance.
Exactly. His life's work ended up pleasing absolutely no one.
Democrats were furious because they demanded an explicit criminal indictment that would force removal from office, and his strict adherence to policy denied them that catharsis.
And Republicans despised him because he refused to grant a total, unblemished exoneration, instead airing highly damaging evidence.
Think about this dynamic from your own perspective as a listener today. How rare is it to actually sit down, clear your schedule, and read a 448-page primary source legal document?
Almost no one has the time or the legal training to do it.
As a society, we rely entirely on intermediaries. We rely on the media, on fragmented social media summaries, and on highly motivated politicians to filter those pages for us.
And in this case, those filters completely, sometimes intentionally, warped the nuance to fit their own pre-existing political narratives. When a public relies entirely on partisan translations, the truth doesn't just get blurred, it gets weaponized.
He wrote a cautious procedural legal document intended for future prosecutors. But the country wasn't looking for a legal document. The country was looking for a political weapon.
And when he refused to provide a simple, devastating weapon to either side, both sides turned on him.
Which brings us back to the premise of our entire exploration today. We desperately want clear, jagged lines in our politics. We want the comfort of binary answers, guilty or not guilty, hero or villain.
But he handed the public a muddy, profoundly complex picture of a democratic system that was under sophisticated cyber attack from the outside and buckling under intense corrupt pressure from the inside.
He diagnosed the disease, but he refused to administer the cure.
Because he fundamentally believed that in a republic, the ultimate cure cannot be administered by an unelected prosecutor. He left the final diagnosis exactly where the Constitution dictates it should be, in the hands of the Congress and ultimately the American people.
So as we wrap up this massive historical dissection, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own. It is a question that builds on everything we've discussed today but challenges the very foundation of our system.
Okay.
If a universally respected, highly decorated veteran follows strict legal guidelines to the absolute letter, if he uncovers massive foreign interference and severe domestic obstruction, yet his meticulous work ends up pleasing absolutely no one and leaving the nation more divided and cynical than before it began, is our legal system actually equipped to handle profound political crises?
That really is the defining structural question of our era.
Are we increasingly desperately asking the slow, rigid, blind mechanics of the criminal law to solve deep emotional societal fractures that only the voters themselves have the power to resolve?
The law can only diagnose the fracture, It cannot force a divided society to heal itself.
Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this extensive journey through the Special Counsel's report and the legacy of the man who wrote it. If you found this exploration valuable, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives into the documents that shape our world. Bid a fond farewell until next time, and always remember to seek out the primary sources.